Okay, so this is just going to be a really quick video. This is the Leica M10, and I've had it for a short period of time. I bought a few accessories for it, and I thought that I might do just like a really quick video that kind of walks you through the camera really quick and gives you a sense of what you can expect from it, what it is that drew me to this camera, and kind of just like a take on what it's like to use the camera for the first time outside of a Leica store, whenever it's actually your camera. So without further ado, I'm going to clean this camera up a little bit because it's got some fingerprints on it, and then I'll get started. Alright, so let's start with the body itself. I'm just going to go through a few thoughts of why I bought this body here, a few different cameras I've owned in the past, and sort of what some of the pros and cons are. So let's just not even talk about price yet. The only thing I'll really say about that is I buy all of my equipment used. There's a few things you need to know whenever you're buying used, because it's always a bit of a risk. But if you buy from a retailer like KEH is a retailer that sells a lot of used camera gear. I actually bought this camera off of somebody on Facebook in a buy-sell group where they sell Leica gear, and he had bought it from KEH. So I'm probably the third owner of this body, but as you can see, it's in absolutely incredible shape. This one is also in black chrome. So if you look at the Leica M10 and you're looking at a black model, it comes in two coatings. There is black paint, which looks basically identical to this, and then you have black chrome. Black chrome is a little bit more durable. You probably have seen photos of older Leica cameras where you get brassing, usually on the edges first, where there's a little bit more rubbing that happens. The reason I wanted black chrome is just that I plan on keeping this camera for a long time, and I just really wanted something that was going to be very durable, and so that's what I decided to go with. I also got a really great deal on this. I bought this camera for $4,350. Which right now, we're in the summer of 2020, so this camera usually goes, even used, for maybe anywhere between $5,000 and $7,000. So I got a great deal on that. All right, let's just talk about kind of like the form factor and some things that you're going to notice as soon as you pick up the camera. So number one, it's very compact for a full frame camera. Number two, it's heavy. And everything on the camera feels very sturdy. Leica is known for creating, just having incredible industrial design and creating very accurate products. And so everything on here, whether it's, this is the ISO dial, you can hear that snap, or any of these dials, everything just feels very mechanically perfect. Same with their lenses, which we'll get to in a second. And it's a very satisfying experience. If you use something like a Fuji, which is actually the video camera that I'm using to film this, they have some really great cameras. I think Fuji is actually a really great brand to go with. If, Leica is not something you can afford, I completely understand. I went with Fuji for quite a while because I could not afford this camera. And they do a really good job, but even their dials that are on the outside don't have the same level of industrial quality that this camera does. You really do feel it. I'm not just saying that, like there really is a difference. And I really do love, in general, just kind of the quality of it and the way that it feels in my hand. So let's talk about why you would buy this camera. So there's a couple of things that are really unique about it. So I mentioned that it's compact for a full frame sensor camera, right? So whenever you're talking about cameras that are full frame, you've got DSLRs, which have that prism inside of them, you know, like a Canon 5D. And the prism, it's got to actually like flip up and down, which means that the body has to be larger. And then the lenses that come with the Canon 5D, they have autofocus and other features in them, which makes the lenses larger. So overall, with like a Canon 5D, you're going to end up with a very large camera. You're going to end up with a camera that is more, you know, this size rather than this size, right? But then you may say like, well, but why would I buy this camera whenever I could buy the Sony A7? That's a very good question. The Sony A7 is a very good camera. A lot of my friends who are professional photographers, directors, that's something they use. And a lot of them buy a Leica M-mount converter so that they can shoot with Leica lenses and have the mirrorless A7 body. That's a great solution. I think that's probably what most works for most people. But for me, I missed that experience of looking through the glass the way that I could with a DSLR. I used to shoot with a Canon 5D. It was my favorite setup. And I liked being able to look directly through glass, but I wanted a more compact body than a DSLR. So your options are really a DSLR, a mirrorless camera, or a rangefinder. This is a rangefinder. So basically what happens is you can look through this little you know, spot here, and whenever you turn on the camera speaks to the lens. It puts up frame lines inside of here that are sort of like, you know, like that. There's actually a couple different frame lines. And this body is really built to work with, I think, 28 to 90 millimeter. So if you were to look through here, let's just say that like, let me grab a piece of paper or something. So let's just say that like this is the viewfinder that you're looking through. So these edges right here, let me just make sure this is actually in frame so I'm not totally messing up. Okay, there we go. So these corners up here, here looking through the Leica viewfinder right here, this is a 28 millimeter. So you got your 28 millimeter there. If you crop in a little bit, this isn't going to be exactly accurate. But those are your frame lines for a 35 millimeter. And then if you go in even more, then you got your 50. So 50 millimeter. Now you may ask, isn't this kind of small? Not yet. A 50 actually is like really a fantastic lens to use with this body. It's just enough room on the outside. And what I believe is that having this room on the outside makes you a better photographer because you can crop in real time. You can move the lens and capture something that's outside of the final photo and get that in real time. It takes a bit of practice. You can also use the live viewfinder here on the back. So if you, let me take the lens cap off so you can actually see. So you've got that live viewfinder there, which you can use. And that's going to give you a full size of whatever it is that you're cropped to. So it's showing you exactly what the sensor is seeing. That's what the live view is. But this is the viewfinder. So let's say you start to get to like 90 millimeter. So now it's really small, right? And this can be really hard to use. So what some people use is they use a 1.4 magnifier that takes this and basically you can put this on the actual eyepiece here. And you know, like everything Leica, it's expensive, but you know, if you're planning to shoot a lot with a 90 millimeter rangefinder, I would recommend that because it basically takes this and zooms it in so that it's almost like you're looking at a lens with a smaller millimeter. I have not used it personally, so I can't speak to exactly how great that is, but because I don't use lenses this long, but that's something to think about. Okay, then focusing. So as you're moving the focus ring on the lens, then this is the focus spot. It's small. I'm not gonna lie, it's small. I sometimes wish it was just a little bit larger. Once you get used to it, it's pretty great, and I've actually been surprised by how quickly I've been able to sort of take photos now that I'm used to doing manual focus. And in some ways I feel like I'm getting better photos than I am with an autofocus because it's forcing me to decide what I want to focus on instead of just accepting whatever autofocus itself finds. The other thing is, because I'm always preparing to focus, then a lot of times I'm ready to shoot immediately. Then once I have this set and I've set the right aperture so that I know I have enough feet of focus, then then I'm able to shoot just one after another and capture the moment. I find sometimes with like a DSLR fully automatic setup that it's having to autofocus each time unless you do autofocus and then switch to manual. And so you can end up in a situation where you're actually getting a ton of delay built in, and it's less fast. It's less fast than a fully manual camera, kind of ironically. Okay. So let's see, what else? So that's kind of like what it's like looking through the viewfinder. This is also related to millimeters. So this thing on the front right here, see this? So it's basically got 3 settings. So this is neutral, pushed, and then there's pushed in. Let's see, is it doing it? And then all the way out. Moving this lever back and forth, you can preview the frame lines that are different than the lens you have on. So right now I have a 50 millimeter on. So if I was going to do this, I would be able to now preview what a 35 looks like, which is really handy because, these lenses are very expensive and, you can't test out everything in store. And so it's pretty nice to be able to get a preview of what the frame lines are like for different millimeter lenses while you're out in the field, because that's all that really matters. Taking photos in store is really only so good. Okay, so now let's talk about why this kind of goes back to speed, but let's talk about post-processing. So I already talked about some of the advantages of being able to shoot with a camera that is very simple like this, very manual, but I'll sort of walk through really quickly what it's like to shoot with the camera and then what it's like to do afterwards. And I think this will kind of get to the heart of why I bought this camera in the first place. So I'm just realizing I need to change something here. I'm going to take this off, this little piece, and I'll explain what this is in a bit. It is, oh man, really on there. Okay. I'll explain what this is in a bit. Let's not talk about that yet. Okay, so let's get this fully on there. And let's take this off. This is a polarizing filter that I had from a previous camera that I really love. It's really great for certain things, but again, let's skip that. Okay, and let's get this Sharpie away from everything. Okay, great. So what I like about shooting with this camera is it's very pure and very fast. So I only use the eyepiece here. I focus, I use this wheel here to step up and step down. So I press this halfway down and then I step up and I step down. I can see that through the viewfinder. I don't use the live view at all. I shoot. Leicas by default do not show you the photo right after you take the photograph. You gotta hit play to do that. I personally love that. I grew up on film photography and this is the closest thing to it. It's a very pure experience. Now, once I get home, obviously I'm gonna take out the video card here. Whoops. Don't worry, these cameras are tough. Okay, take that out, put it in the computer. And what I really love about this camera, and the reason I bought it, is I don't spend any time in Lightroom. Not really. So what's great about this camera is that it's really good at capturing reality. It is very sharp because it's got great lenses, and they have built this body and this lens to be able to speak the language of the lens and to be able to make the most out of it. So I feel like whenever I take a photograph with this camera, I'm getting something that feels very close to almost like a better version of film. Like I said, I grew up shooting film, but I feel like digital photography with this camera has finally gotten to the point where it's superior to film in a 35mm format, and it's pretty amazing. So once I take the photo and I get it back home, as long as I set the white balance correctly, then I'm pretty much done. But a lot of times once I get in the computer, I set the white balance, but I don't change really anything else if I took the photo correctly. You really can't compensate for a bad photo if the lighting was bad, no matter what you do. And so I just try to challenge myself to take better photos. And if you do that, then once you get into Lightroom, maybe you have to tweak the white balance, maybe the exposure. Sometimes in Lightroom, I will take the highlights and put them down like -20, but that's just if I happen to be shooting in sun. And that's it. Then I export. So there's really nothing else to do. Sometimes I like to crop my photos at a ratio of 5:7 before posting them to Instagram. This gives me a little bit of like room on the left and right to recrop, and it also displays larger on Instagram, so that it's not so squished and short, but it's also not as tall and boring as a square photo. So that's just a little tip, take it or leave it. All right. I feel like the lenses are a big topic, so maybe we could just talk really quickly about the accessories. So I really like this strap. It's just what I was looking for. This one is made by Leica. It's called the carry strap. This is the brown color. They call it vintage brown, which annoys me because it's just brown. It's just the natural color that leather is. And I think if something's timeless, you don't really have to like cheapen it by calling it vintage. As I said, I got this extension tube. This is a 16469Y. That is the model number for this. It's a 10mm extension tube. You can get these on eBay for anywhere from $100 to $200. This one was in mint condition, and it cost me $140. And the only reason I got it for that price, because it came with the original box and everything, I think it'd never been used, is that the person who was selling it, they spelled the name of it wrong, and so I just found it at the very end of my search results, ended up buying that. Okay, this also used, everything is used. This is a nice soft case. This is the short one, so there's a short one and a long one. This is a 50mm lens. I can even have the extension tube on here, and this UV filter, and this, and it still fits in here. So I don't really need the long version of this. And what I have coming in the mail is actually also a grip, the Leica grip that, replaces the bottom plate, and you can hold it on the side. And so I think that that's going to be a really nice fit for me. And it should all fit in here. So I'm pretty excited about that. What is this for? Actually, let me put it all the way in so you can see it. So what is this for? This is for basically like if I'm going to toss this into a backpack. These cameras are tough, but it's a nice camera. A lot of photographers sort of believe in this idea that, your camera is meant to be used. You don't want to be precious with it. And I do believe that, but at the same time, like, why dent a nice car? It's a nice camera, and I don't want to scratch it up too badly. So that way I can take this and I can still have that spirit of, throw it in the bag, or even if I'm just like hanging this around my body for an extended period of time, then I don't have to worry if someone comes by and they smack it, then I have just a little bit more protection. So I really like that. Okay, what else do you want to talk about? Well, let's talk about handling, since I brought up the grip, because there's a reason why I'm buying that. So there's a few different things you can get for more stability. What I find is, with this camera, because it's manual, you're doing a lot of this. You're doing a lot of focusing, you're doing a lot of manual changing of the aperture, so you're doing a lot of one-handed use, which means my hand starts to get a little bit tired, especially after, a lot of shooting. And so I find that it starts to get a little bit unbalanced for me after a while, because this has a lot of brass in it. It's heavy. And so there's a few different options you have. They have a thumb grip that slots into the hot shoe here. What else do they have? Well, they definitely have this grip, which is the one that I'm planning to get. You could do both. The other thing is, if you just think about, shooting for a long time. Putting all that, if you are putting a thumb grip here that's bigger than the one that's already there, that's going to put extra pressure on your wrist right here. And the other thing is that's not really where I need the leverage. So if you're thinking about like as you're shooting and you're trying to keep it level, it's going to be a lot better if I'm pulling back this way as I'm focusing than it is to be pushing this way, both sort of like this way and that way. I'm not really pulling back. So I want the grip because it's going to pull the camera back towards me as I'm doing this, and I think that's going to give me a lot more longevity whenever I'm out on shoots. Maybe I'll do a video about that whenever I get that in. It's not here yet. Not a whole lot to say about the lenses. They're the best in the world. They're extremely sharp. I think what I'll talk about really quickly is just Summicron versus Summilux. Summilux goes all the way down to 1.2, or sorry, 1.4, I believe. Summicron goes down to 2. They're essentially equal lenses. They take extremely similar pictures. But the Summicrons, which go down to 2, are more compact. So to me, this is a perfect travel lens. The other thing is modern cameras have just come a long way. So like I talked about a 5D earlier. I had the original 5D, fantastic camera, full frame sensor, loved it. Had the 85 1.2, which is a fantastic portrait lens, one of the best lenses in the world in my opinion. You know, what I love about this though is I'm getting as good of photographs as I got with that 85 millimeter, which was a monster. I mean, it's about that big. It's a giant piece of glass and it's heavy. I don't know exactly how much it weighs, but it's very heavy. Maybe 1.8 pounds. Let's go with that. And so I get a really compact setup here. And if I was to go to the Summilux, they're still small, considering the power they pack. They're maybe going to be a little bit, well, for sure wider. So maybe they're going to be a little bit wider like that. And I'm just not really desiring that. I want a compact travel lens. I want to be as small as possible. And ISO has come a really long way. I mean, this camera is the opposite of noisy. It is so smooth. And they've done an incredible job of making these ISOs really usable. So I can go all the way up to, I've tested this, I've shot at every ISO with like a still life, and just to kind of compare the graininess. And even 6400 is, it's not great, but it's nothing like what the old ISOs used to be like. If you shot with a 5D at 6400, it would be extremely grainy. Here it's not bad. I feel like I can comfortably shoot at 1600 and it's not going to show much grain at all, especially if you're posting on Instagram or, something that's sort of a mobile first kind of platform. But all of these are pretty great. I mean, I try to shoot at the lowest ISO possible, just out of good practice. And so, long story short, I don't feel like I need the extra stop. So the Summicrons are, don't quote me on this, because I buy things used. So let me talk in used prices. So this lens I think is probably about $2,200, $2,400 whenever you go, after taxes and everything, right? So this is maybe a $2,400 lens. It's used, but it looks like it's in mint condition. So that's about where you're going to pay for a minty used lens. But if this was a Summilux 50 millimeter, I believe it would be more like, it really depends on the quality, but let's say anywhere from $3,400 to $5,000. So it's a big price jump, and it's larger, which doesn't make it as good for travel. And with the ISO advancements, I just don't know that I need that extra stop anymore. And also, I've had a very expensive lens that went all the way down to 1.2. So you'd think I'd be shooting wide open a lot. Except what I found is it's almost impossible to focus check every photo in the moment, whenever you're shooting a lot. And usually I would end up having to stop up to about 1.8, 2.4, even as high as 4 to be able to ensure that I was getting everything in focus. And so over years of shooting, I've just found that like the failure rate of shooting an aperture lower than 2 is just not really worth it. Now, if you're shooting in a studio environment or you have a model and you have lots of time, that's a different setup, it's a different scenario. Although I would argue you kind of run into the same problem. And at some point I will get a Summilux, just because I want to be able to play around with it. I think I'm going to try and save up for a Summilux 35mm, because this is really an outdoor lens for me, because it's got the longer focal length. What I think 35mm are really good for is you're inside, you're in a bar, you're in a cafe, you want to be able to get more of the environment, and you're going to be shooting in lower light. So I think I may get like a Summilux 35mm, but I probably won't get a Summilux 50mm, just because I don't need that kind of firepower. I'm not gonna utilize it very often. And so I bought this one and said, okay, if I'm constantly shooting at 2, maybe I'll buy the Summilux, but that's just not really happening. Great. I think that's it for now. You know, I'm probably going to do some more videos like this. Basically what I'm doing is I'm doing videos that I looked for whenever I was in the buying process and couldn't find them. And just trying to like make videos on topics that don't seem to be covered yet. And so this was basically like a, hey, I'm really interested in buying an M10 and I don't know what to get, and just kind of walking you through my process of like what I like about it. And yeah, that's kind of that. Let me just think for a second and see if there's anything else that comes to mind. I guess I could walk through some menu stuff. Let me see how much time I have left on my battery here. And I am out of battery. Okay, so let's just leave it at that.